In the heart of West Africa, a new leadership in Nigeria under President Tinubu is driving the country's economic destiny in a new direction. In this report, we delve into the first 100 days of his administration, a period that is shaping the nation's economic landscape. President Tinubu kicked off his 100 days right at his swearing-in ceremony when he vowed to grow the economy by at least 6% a year and threw the country's multi-billion-dollar full subsidy payments program into the dustbin.
No provision is there for fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy is gone.
Those curtain-raising pronouncements sent the local stock market soaring and Nigeria's dollar bonds railed. Riding on those accolades, the president suspended the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, announced the unification of exchange rates, and appointed a special advisor on monetary policy.
I had promised to reform the economy for the long-term good by fighting major imbalances that has plagued our economy, ending the subsidy and the preferential exchange rate system were key to this fight. This fight is to define the fate and future.
These reforms are fundamental for the economy and are expected to have long-term payoffs. However, the path to those long-term benefits is bumpy, with unexpected consequences, as the naira nosedived sharply around 40% and petrol prices jumped more than 200%. In a bid to shore up currency reserves and stem the fall of the naira, the central bank announced some measures. But the administration needs to do more, and urgently too. On the fiscal side, the government threw in billions of naira in palliative measures. The Tinubu's administration also announced tax reforms to stimulate investments, ease the burden on local industries and the civilians, while extending the effective date of the new Finance Act 2023 until September the 1st. All of these were backed by 4 executive orders of the president, to be driven by a new presidential committee on fiscal reforms.
The mandate that this committee has is to get rid of so many taxes that come in the way of prosperity for our people. So Nigerians should look forward to a more harmonized, fewer number of taxes. But then it seems like it's a contradiction. How do you then raise the revenue? Now, we know where we're going to get the revenue from. There's a huge tax gap. What that means is, as of today, without introducing any new taxes, if you get everyone that needs to pay their taxes to pay, we will not be where we are. So we think that that tax gap is somewhere in the region of 20 trillion naira.
As Tinubu's reform on fuel subsidy removal takes effect, the government says significant savings of nearly 1 trillion naira is being accrued every month, boosting funds available for sharing from the Federation Account Allocation Committee, FAC. But how should this windfall be spent?
The problem is always implementation, right? Some governors are getting it right. They're rolling out initiatives around transportation, agriculture. And so the state governors must not only think about short-term projects, but long-term projects, strengthening the sectors. If you talk about agriculture, value addition is very important. And so we want to see how many of them are setting up special economic zones, how many of them are setting up manufacturing centers for people to take their raw materials, take their agri-produce and, manufacture it, or, ensure that there's value added to it. So there's not just raw commodities being exported. And so our farmers have to be empowered because the cost of food is going up. Inflation is going up.
All the while, the structure of the new administration began to take shape within the first 100 days. With the screening of new ministries by the National Assembly, their portfolio announcements, and other strategies to address knotty issues such as fiscal balance, debt, and a stubbornly high inflation. The clarity needed on these and more started to unravel as the new cabinet members spoke about their new assignments and what to expect. Taking the center stage on this was the Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Uwaleke, when he outlined the vision for Nigeria's economic future based on President Tinubu's campaign 8-point agenda.
He has pointed out in 8 priority areas where he's going to take Nigeria. And his key priorities are to improve the lives of Nigerians by providing food security, by ending poverty. His plan for the economy is economic growth, job creation, access to capital, particularly consumer credit that makes goods affordable to the average Nigerian.
In the meantime, the labor unions have called out 2 national strike actions in the first 100 days of the administration, protesting the painful impact of his fuel and foreign exchange policies. The manufacturers are also in pain, reporting some 30% decline in sales between April and June, as well as rising costs of operations. Nigerians have also expressed their thoughts on Tinubu's reforms so far.
This is a time where our policymakers and our leaders must be very humble and ask for help, even when they do not know, because we don't have the money right now. And what we have is our human resource. We have our human resource all over the world. We have Nigerians who are the best brains, even running other governments. Ministries, heads of agencies should not be afraid to ask for help, right? So, like I said, there have been some square pegs in square holes. We've seen some of these, reforms and plans, but implementation is what we really need. And this is a time where I must urge our governors, especially our governors, because right now, people used to complain that from FAC, they didn't get enough allocation. Now you have the allocations. This is not a time to just settle your own people. This is the time to think about your legacy, think about long-term projects that will really catalyze growth, that will create jobs, not just jobs, create wealth. The only way to solve poverty is to create wealth. And we have a lot of Nigerians that are entrepreneurial. We have a youth population. Let us use those things to our advantage. Look at the softer sectors like the creative industry. Some of those sectors have not even been tapped. So we need a government that can really go close to the people and find out what their pain points are and co-create the solutions with them.
From sharply lower naira value to higher fuel prices, leaner disposable income, and new fiscal policy directions, the first 100 days of the Tinubu's administration have been anything but tough. The government, however, believes that these pains are necessary to chart a new horizon of economic stability and prosperity for all, asking Nigerians to hang on to what Mr. President described as a renewed hope for Africa's biggest economy and its 200 million people. Nkechi Nana, Arise News.
Well, we're joined now by Professor Uche Uwaleke, a director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies, Nasarawa State University. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight tonight. Good to see you again.
Thanks so much, Ngozi.
All right, so it's Tinubu's 100 days in office. We're beaming the searchlight on the economic policies that this government has taken so far in the last 100 days. Some analysts say, look, there have been strong policies, but weak in terms of, outcome. What are your assessments so far?
Well, to begin with, I think it wouldn't be realistic, to do a thorough and objective assessment of an administration just, within 100 days, and particularly one that took off on the back of very critical reforms. You mentioned the issue of removal of fuel subsidy and the exchange rate, unification. What you should, realize is that the outcomes, of some of the things, that have been put in place now may not manifest until maybe sometime next year. I'm talking about, for example, the setting up of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Reforms, Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, the fact that the President is also making efforts to attract investment, strip overseas, yes, India. So we may not see the manifestation of all this until maybe early next year. The other issue to remember too, when he came, he granted this, issued an executive order, suspending the implementation of some taxes up to, till 1st September. So the real impact may not really show in the first 100 days. But let me also say this, that I had expected, given the fact that this issue of fuel subsidy was a legacy issue, and the fact that if you look at the justification for removing it, it made a lot of sense. The corruption associated with it, and so on and so forth. My expectation was that in coming into office, the first thing that ought to have been done, would have been to do a thorough assessment of the situation, possibly, put in place an audit of the entire system to really know what the issues are, okay, and then also find a way of phasing the implementation as opposed to the one fell swoop approach that was adopted. So, and that is why we are having these adverse consequences. The two reforms that were implemented in one fell swoop. In my view, if you look at this quarter, for example, you're talking about the economy. I don't see where that growth is going to come from. The last quarter GDP growth rate, printed at 2.51%, and the third quarter, that's second quarter, the third quarter of this, GDP growth rate, I don't see, real GDP increasing. As a matter of fact, it may tank because we are all witnessing a slowdown in economic activities, as a result of the removal of fuel subsidy. I'm sure these days people talk about less traffic because there are fewer cars on the road. So economic activities have actually slowed down, okay. And we had a glimpse of that again from the GDP report of quarter two. If you look at that GDP report of quarter two, you find that the transport sector that grew by as much as 9% in the first quarter seriously went down in the second quarter. Just within that month, the subsidy was removed in May. Between May and June, it really resulted in a lot of distortion in that sector. So transport sector, dropped by as much as 50%, from a positive 9% to minus 50%, the transport sector. So looking at what is happening now, the entire thing, as I said, I'm a lot, again, being realistic. It may not happen this quarter, even if we are going to see any improvements maybe, subsequently, because I don't see it coming from agriculture. Agriculture contributes about 20% to GDP, okay? And agriculture just grew by 1.5% in the second quarter. So I don't see any, significant improvement in this quarter, okay. All right? You talk about trade. Trade contributes 16%. The removal of fuel subsidy is also impacting trade, negatively. Okay, perhaps you talk about manufacturing, contributing about 8% to GDP. Manufacturing only increased by 2.2% in the last quarter. So I also don't see any serious improvement. Okay. Perhaps where we may see some hope again is in the financial services sector, which grew and which has continued to grow. And I've always said, I've always maintained that the current financialization we are witnessing, and by that I mean the increase, in the size of the financial sector and in the importance of the financial sector is not reflected, okay, in the real sector. But there's a glimmer of hope, and that glimmer of hope we have seen in the stock market. Yes, okay. Since the first 100 days, of course, the stock market has been quite bullish. Yes.
Well, we'll come to all of that, but then, we can sit here and say that the impact will be felt later positively. Oh, yes. But then the traders in Ariaria market in Aba, I don't know that. The woman selling in Baggy market in Ibadan, your state, doesn't know that. Yes. Or any Lagos market for that matter,
absolutely.
Aswani market, if you like. Talk to us about the cost of doing business. How are these people feeling the pinch?
Well, Very, very severe. Very, very severe. You know, I was only concentrating on GDP, I'm sure, for a reason of time.
Yeah.
But there are also other macro issues, you know, one need to analyze. Take inflation, for example. The trader you're talking about is you know, feeling the pinch of inflation. Inflation rate today, okay, as of last month, was put at 24.08%. And food inflation in many areas is even as high as 28, in some other areas over 30%. So inflation is rising, GDP growth is weak, so you have a situation in which you have stagflation, which is what we're actually experiencing. Unemployment rate is also rising. Okay, never mind that they changed their methodology and we got 4.1%. Poverty rate is also, you know, rising. So the small business person is feeling the pinch, you know, transmitting through this, or rather, the source of it, the removal of fuel subsidy, okay, is also affecting the market woman that you're, talking about. And the monetary policy side, again, also needs to be mentioned. If you look at the interest rate environment today in the country, it's quite high, okay? The central bank has been tightening monetary policy, all in a bid to tame inflation. So as we speak, the anchor interest rate is 18.75%. So what that means is that lending rates, of course, are bound to be high. So it makes it difficult for businesses to access credit. Okay, but the good thing is that the president has recognized that and is saying, as one of his 8-point agenda, he wants to also ensure that there is improvement in access to credit. So access to credit is very critical. Ease of doing business generally, okay, is still low, in the country. And you can't say you are, even this issue of forex, that's also another discussion, altogether. Yeah. The exchange rate thing that we unification. This fuel subsidy we are talking about, the one that has gone is the direct intervention the government has been, making, But the indirect subsidy, okay, somehow has also been manifesting. That one is the one that comes from the exchange rate issue. Remember before now, the NNPC was getting dollars from the secondary intervention sales window, okay, where as at that time exchange rate was around $460, 460 naira to the dollar, okay. Again, the I&E window at that time was a lot higher, so there was encouraging round tripping, which is also one of the reasons why they said they're unifying exchange. But the point I'm making is that the fact that the pump price of fuel, PMS, has not been changing on a daily basis or even on a weekly basis is because of the deliberate intention to ensure that doesn't happen. So again, that's some kind of backdoor subsidy coming from the exchange rate side.
Very quickly, how do you close the 20 trillion naira tax gap that we heard from Taiwo Oyedele there? What does this government need to do very quickly moving forward? Okay,
well, whatever I'm going to say here is my personal opinion. Because I'm a member of the Presidential Committee on fiscal policy and tax reforms. Great. So we have all agreed that our chairman should be the one speaking when it comes to the issue of taxes. But I can tell you that a lot of work is being done, and at the end of it, or by the time our report is ready, I'm pretty sure that businesses, just as you had him say on TV, talking about the chairman and Taiwo, yes, businesses will really breed because there are a lot of incentives that are there for
thank you.
Yes, for
thank you very much indeed. Professor Uche Uwaleke, Director, Institute of Capital Market Studies, Nasarawa State University. Thank you for coming to Newsnight.